You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 43 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. I really don't think I can change that. I think you just still got to be calling champion.
That's
even
fine.
If you're national.
Hey, look, it still sounds good. I'm fine. I feel less imposter syndrome now, so it's okay.
He's like, I'll let it slide. So over the next two pods, we're going to be diving into our predictions for the impact of Everfest on the future classic constructed meta, how each hero looks to be shaping up in that respective meta, as well as our deck ideas, and finally giving each hero a grade based on how we think they're going to perform in the meta. And this is with a caveat, I got to say, assuming no changes, right? And there's obviously going to be a few, but we're just taking what we got from Everfest, assigning a grade to it, because obviously there were some winners, Prism, and some losers. I'm looking at you, brutes. So anyway, Hayden, talk to me about your week in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, good introduction. Everfest is upon us, right? This is going to be a cool sort of... I think we initially thought about trying to cram this into one podcast, but we're going to cover every class. We're going to talk about every hero. We're going to talk about all the cards from Everfest, that we think are going to have impact. So it's going to be a big sort of task ahead of us. But yeah, this week in Flesh and Blood, good. Welcome to Wraith Farewell events. To be honest, that's what I did over the weekend. So I spent basically my whole weekend on. I managed to play 5 drafts over the full weekend. So I got in a few drafts, and I was really excited about it as well. I hate to think that it might be the last time I draft Welcome to Wraith in a store environment, but I have picked up a couple of boxes to keep away to draft later on. I had an awesome time. I went to 5 in total. I tried to draft every class. I didn't end up getting to draft Katsu, which kind of broke my heart, to be honest. I really wanted to draft every class, but didn't draft Katsu. Drafted, I think, Warrior once, Guardian twice, Brute twice, I think. It was cool. I got to meet a lot of new people because I went to a few different stores that I hadn't been to before in Sydney. The Sydney scene here in Australia is like really just blown up over the past few months since Tales of Aria and kind of the end of our lockdown. So that's really cool to see. There's basically all of the game stores, as far as I'm aware, are now starting to run Flesh and Blood and have nights. So if you live in Sydney, you can usually find like an armory every night of the week within kind of like sort of 30-minute drive if you're in most places, which is really cool. So yeah, welcome to Wraith Draft. Had a good time. What about you? Did you get to a few drafts? What have you been up to?
Well, I played one, but we did 2 drafts that day, cool. So yep. Longer event. I had a good time. I drafted a Brute deck, which kind of sucked, to be honest. It wasn't Yellow Bellow. That must have been why. But I think like the Brute deck that I drafted had a lot of very good cards in it, but it didn't have the fundamental pieces to make those cards broken, like have Go Again. So it was like a lot of 1-for-7s. I don't know, for some reason that card is just escaping my mind.
Savage Swing.
Savage Swing, Wrecker Romps, things like that. And doing that as the only thing you do that turn, considering they also discard a card, it's both tough. Usually not enough, and you're going to fatigue faster even if you have like 35 cards. So
you need the club. You need the club to come in afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. So that wasn't great. That draft wasn't great, but I learned my lesson. And the next draft, I drafted a absolutely broken Guardian deck that had Tectonic Plating in it, and basically any card I wanted because it was very open. But yeah, I had a great time as well. I was actually surprised at how much of a good time I had, and I'm going to miss it dearly. Not necessarily not playing at locals, but playing Welcome to Wraith.
Yeah. Well, we're about to get into some news and a pretty massive news announcement, right? The first Pro Tour has been announced. We're going to get into that in a second, but I'm bringing at least 1 box of Welcome to Wraith with me, and we're going to be drafting in the house. That's for sure. Whether it be after the PT or whatever, but we're definitely going to get a Welcome to Wraith draft in as a group. So I'm excited about that. And also, can we just point out, not only did you open a Tectonic Plating, what did you open in your prize packs, Brendan?
Yeah, so I went to collect my prize packs, and I just grabbed a bunch of Crucible of War, and then I asked Bill behind the desk. I was like, you think I should grab Crucible World? He's like, well, Arcane Rising has Command and Conquer in it. I was like, okay. I swapped it out. I think I opened 5 packs, and then the 5th one had a foil Command and Conquer in it. So I was like, good advice, Bill. Not bad.
I dropped Brennan tweeted this on Twitter, and I dropped a little comment and said, "This is why you don't win on camera." The luck, the luck of the pools. No, it's good. Nice pools. Awesome weekend. I'm also going to miss Welcome to Wraith. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to draft it again. I'm sure. But no, I think a lot of people. The overall feedback I had was that really cool event. People had a good time.
Yeah, and the best set in Flesh and Blood.
For just full stop.
Yep, full stop.
What a boomer.
What a boomer. Awesome. But with that, let's go ahead and head on to the news section, which is jam-packed this week, Hayden.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest headline is that we have the announcement. I mean, probably could be the biggest organized play announcement so far in Flesh and Blood's history, right? But Pro Tour number 1 is coming. And it's going to be in New Jersey, which I don't know how many people picked New Jersey for the first Pro Tour. I think a lot of people thought, maybe a more of a convention city in the US. But awesome stuff. I haven't been to the East Coast really in the US, so we're not properly. So I'm excited to maybe tack on a little bit of travel while I'm there. But yeah, Pro Tour 1 is happening. I do have the details here. So first of all, I'm just going to call out some of the details for the Pro Tour that have been announced. So it is happening on the Friday, May 13th. And that weekend, there is also going to be a calling. So Friday, the Pro Tour starts. Saturday, there's a calling. Saturday, Sunday. Pro Tour is Friday, Saturday for the Swiss rounds. And then Sunday is the top 8. And then also on Sunday, there's a Battle Hardened event, which is the new PTI event, the new Pro Tour Invitation event. It's a Pro Quest on steroids, I guess. More, bigger prize pool, more players, etc. In terms of, I guess the format of the Pro Tour, it's class constructed. So it's going to be class constructed. So it looks like the next set is not going to be out by then. So this is going to be an Everfest class constructed. So we've got a long lead time as we go between now and May 13th for Everfest constructed. And then I think somewhere around June, the new set comes out. So it will be class constructed all the way through. I think it's about 15 rounds of Swiss. I think it's like 8 on, I can just have it here. 7 rounds of Swiss, day 1. At the conclusion of 7 rounds, all players with 4 or more wins make it to day 2 of the Pro Tour. And then there's another 7 rounds on day 2, so 14 rounds total, and then a cut to top 8, which is played on Sunday. And in terms of the pricing, got to shout that out. So for the Pro Tour, big prize pool. It's a $100,000 prize pool. First place is $25,000 US gold prize card. It says Pro Tour champion prize card plus a gold legendary of the heroes class talent. So that's interesting. I'm excited to see what there's going to be immortalized a first Pro Tour champion prize card. Who knows what that'll be. That's really cool. And then the top 8, I think it's like 10, 6.5, 3 for the rest of the top 8, depending on where you come. Gold legendary for that hero class or talent, plus PTI for the full top 8 as well. And the really cool thing as well is if you top 32 the Pro Tour, you're going to get a PTI plus some cash to offset your travel, which is cool. And they pay out all the way down to 64th as well. So yeah, quite a big prize pool for this Pro Tour, right, Brendan?
Yeah, I'm excited. This is huge for Flesh and Blood, right? This is part of the legitimization. I don't know if legitimization is a word.
Make it up.
Whatever. Whatever that means. But it's important for Flesh and Blood. Like, we're putting our foot in the ground, our flagpoles on the top of the mountain. Flesh and Blood organized play is here to stay, and it's a real thing that you can do. Maybe not professionally, but at a very high level. So I'm really excited. And yeah, I mean, it's going to be a 3-day event, 14 rounds of Swiss, top 8. It's going to be brutal, but I know Hayden's flying over, so
sure,
big house in Jersey. I'm pumped.
Yeah, there's a few more things I want to just talk about through the announcement as well, and there's a bit of a discussion I think we're going to have, and it's probably going to take up a little bit of time on the pod, but we really want to talk about it. The first thing, one of the things I think about, New Jersey, really interesting, I thought, but also I'm pretty sure the first Magic Pro Tour was in New Jersey, so I feel like there's a bit of nostalgia there, and we know that with the organized play sort of winding down for Magic, especially at the high level, it feels like Flesh and Blood is kind of taking that place, and it's a cool little nod, I think, in some ways. And New Jersey is, I think, for like accommodation and travel and event sort of venues, it's maybe a bit more serviceable than actual New York City. I want to talk about the calling. The calling is a bit bigger than a normal calling. I think it's a 20,000 worth of cash prizes, and there's also the last Iandale's gold foil spring tunic cold foil given out at this event as well. They've said the last in the pricing. And then you can go to Fab TCG and see the rest of the pricing, but the rest of it is a classic constructed calling. And then the Brennan, you like this because we've been talking about this. Sunday is a Blitz battle hardened, which is very interesting. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that quite takes the cake for having competitive Blitz events. Which honestly, I don't know if I don't want to make there'd be a misunderstanding. That's what I'm lobbying for, but. With a set like Everfest, who knows if we'll get? I would have expected maybe some ProQuest at that are Blitz or like some Battle Hardens on day 2. So we're getting that, which is cool. It's good. It's good. It's good that Blitz has more support than just armories.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a good level to do it. Maybe ProQuest season as we talked about last week. Anyway, want to talk about qualifying for the Pro Tour as well because this is probably the one that's driven the most conversation over the past 24 hours since the announcement in the community. What that kind of looks like. So,
how do I qualify, Hayden?
Wow, so there's a few ways you can qualify, and let me read this. So this is the eligibility. The Pro Tour is an invitation on the event. Players can qualify for the Pro Tour in the following ways. So the first way is obtaining invitation to Pro Tour New Jersey through install ProQuest season, which we know about. We've talked about that. That kicks off in just 2 weeks. Redeeming a PTI, so a professional tournament invitation, which people have historically from callings, from nationals, from whatever it might be. Obtained from a previous event. A player, and then this is something that's, and we'll get to this. I'm just going to read through it and then we can talk about it. But under redeeming a PTI, a player may gift for redemption up to 1 PTI to another player per Pro Tour by emailing protour@fabtcg.com with your name, GMID, etc., etc. The player gifting the PTI must send the email from the same email address as registered. There's a few kind of T's and C's on there, but effectively you can you can give the Pro Tour for a PTI for any Pro Tour, 1 per Pro Tour. There's also ratings-based invitations. Maybe not quite what you thought this would be. This is not ELO invitations. This is XP invitations. So the top 100 players globally, 90-day XP, are going to get an invitation, and the top 100 players lifetime XP globally are going to get an invitation. And rating-based invitations do not pass down for Pro Tour New Jersey. So there's been a bit of conversation about this, Brendan. I'll let you. You got something to say, or?
Well, I'm just a nobody. So there's a national champion in the room. I'd like to hear what he says regarding the gifting. I mean, surely there's no way to exploit that system, is there, Hayden?
Well, I will not be gifting a PTI. I would like to hold on to my PTIs. I mean, I guess the first thing, and this is where the conversations come around, there's a couple of things. So first of all, there's the XP as an invitation system, and then there's the gifting of PTIs. I think the rest is kind of, as you'd expect, and self-explanatory. It could be an issue with people selling PTIs. Let's be honest about it, right?
Could be an issue. I mean, it literally, it's going to happen. There's no way it doesn't happen. It's weird, right? I just don't like the word gift. Because, you can give somebody a PTI, that's cool, but they might as well acknowledge that this is going to happen, because it kind of feels like they don't understand that a PTI would be sold. I don't know. It's weird. I really don't understand. I don't understand, them be like, you can gift a really cool system, when actually that system probably plays out with people selling them and people buying them. And that's not very competitive.
I don't really understand this gifting piece. And the reason that Alice has put in here is, to have someone travel with you is like a reason you might do this. To be honest,
it's cool in theory, right? Like if everything in the world was absolutely perfect and you could just gift your friend who worked really hard and played with you all of the competitive season, but just didn't get there, and now you can gift them one of your extra ones. You can go together. That's awesome. Yeah, not how it works out most of the time. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it does feel like we're going to see, and unfortunately, I've already seen. And everyone's entitled to their own opinion. This is my opinion. As I'm seeing on community pages and stuff, and Facebook pages and Discords, people asking and reaching out and trying to trade or buy or ask for these to be gifted to them. And it kind of takes the shine off it a little bit for me in terms of, this is the Pro Tour. This is the first Pro Tour. This is the pinnacle of what our competitive game of Flesh and Blood is at the highest level. And for you to effectively be able to buy your way into that event, it doesn't feel great. And people might compare it to, well, in the World Series of Poker, you can buy your way in, you can buy your chip stack, and if you're not good, you're going to go out early. Cool, I get it, but this is an invitation on the event, except that potentially it's not. Anyway, I want to talk about, because I want to move it on a little bit, I want to talk about the XP system. We're giving top 100 players 90-day global XP, and that cutoff is the 23rd of March. So that 90-day XP for this window started in December 23rd. So we're already, halfway through this 90-day XP basically to accumulate. And also top 100 players lifetime XP. And we're not using the ELO system. I want you to talk about the XP system because I think you have more of a view on this from just from being in North America and having the skirmish season and understanding how the online piece works, because online events do give you XP, and for whatever that's worth. But in terms of the I guess the other side of it, not using the ELO system, I can get that. The ELO system is pretty new. We haven't had a lot of events. A lot of regions haven't had the opportunity to play in larger scale events, or very few, right? Even here in Australia, we've literally had a Nationals and a Calling 2 years ago, and that's it to give to ELO. Europe have had nothing so far. Calling Utrecht was cancelled, of course, unfortunately. So I understand not using ELO and or at least not using it in full. Maybe they could have part used some ELO. There is players, there's people who have been competing and playing multiple callings, of course, in North America, as you know. But the XP system, what's your kind of thoughts on using XP? Because we had a lot of questions on this, especially in our Discord. There was some discussion around is this the right thing to do? Does this incentivize grinding and sharking at local events? And does this make an armory setting for a lot of people now become this ultra competitive, got to grind for XP thing?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and translate your question and say, hey, Brendan, I want people to be angry at you, not me. But so the thing is the argument is not that the ELO system is good or that it's perfect, and that people in Europe, like you said, they just had a calling canceled. That sucks. The argument is actually a lot more reasonable than that. It's that we've tried this before. We've used XP to qualify. We've used XP to gain rewards, and it sucked. The 1K XP thing was a joke. It was absolutely a joke. You can ask one of our good friends, Dante Delfico. Dante, how did you get it? Wasn't playing local armories, I'll tell you that. And he wasn't even exploiting. That was just how it went. The thing is people look at the system and they think that, oh, this is awesome. Now I can go to my locals and I can have a chance to be on the Pro Tour. Maybe, but it's really not Andy Armory who gets it. It's Eric Exploiter who gets it. The person who's like, okay, how many things can I grind online? How many people can I get? What?
Gary Grinder.
Yeah, Gary Grinder, whatever you want to say. How many events can I play online? How many armories can I go to and ask people to scoop for me? How many, I can go to now there's a new player I'm playing with. Okay, should I teach them the game? No, because I have to win. It's time, this is a plus EV time, money kind of thing. And it's just not good. It doesn't work out the way we think it does. And we've seen it multiple times. It's not like I'm just saying this is going to happen without evidence. 1K XP, skirmish season was miserable because of this. Ultimately, when we got to Road to Nationals, the invite list was so long that it didn't matter, which may be happening here as well. But you had skirmishes not letting players play. You had skirmishes that were, inflating rounds. You had people that were playing ridiculous amounts of them. People that were grinding online armories during times when a normal person can't. So if you think that this benefits you because you're a normal player and you get to go to an armory once a week, not really. It's really the person that can play all day, throughout the day, throughout the week, play international events, European events in APAC, whatever it is. That's who this really benefits. And that's what's rough. I'm not saying ELO is the way to go. I'm just saying we've seen systems and rewards be put behind something like an XP barrier, and it's been a bad system because the fundamentals behind that, what you have to do to get XP is inherently very exploitable. And the thing is there's a lot of other arguments here too, which I'll touch on. People say, oh, well, some of us were priced out of the calling. Well, do you know what's more expensive than a calling? Trying to play 4 armories a week.
More. If you want to get the XP to get into this, you're going to be, for 90 days, you're going to be playing more than 4 armories a week. Let's be honest.
Yeah, maybe. That's the thing is, I don't know how they actually break down, but it's not like that. Or it's not cheaper, right? It's not a better system in terms of a monetary thing. And yeah, I kind of forgot my second point, but I think it just leads to a lot of not fun gameplay. And I really want to be I am optimistic about this because I do realize that braided ELO, it was not great considering that some parts of the world had their events canceled and it's inherently flawed. But just blindly throwing out the goal is okay, we're going to take it off 90-day XP. And this is something that we've seen them do, and we've seen players exploit it before. And just throwing that out there and making that the way you get into the Pro Tour, I don't understand. Like, there's no way that they thought about this over a long period of time, looked at recent relevant data, and then concluded that this was the best system. It's very confusing to me as someone who played during those times when COVID happened and when XP gave you rewards, whether it was a gold foil or it was an invite to Road to Nationals. I don't like it. But I don't have a great solution for you at the same time. I wish that there was more nuance to it, right? I wish they were more detailed. I wish they were more nuanced, and that we wouldn't have to run into exploitation and sort of feels bad scenarios.
So I have a couple of things to caveat this with, but both with what we're saying, because I think it's really important to understand people to understand where we're coming from. First of all, this isn't we're coming from what is best for us, because regardless, we both are sitting on multiple PTIs. We both have ProQuest seasons that we're excited to go and play, and those be worth something. And for me personally, I think I'm sitting 19th on the all-time XP at the moment. I don't really have a concern about... I never expected to get an invitation from my XP, but if it happens, it's going to happen, and it looks like I'll probably get one, unless, the amount of XP that goes up is just astronomical. But regardless, that doesn't mean anything to me. It's not what's important to me. What is important to me here is the impact that this could have on just gameplay, just people's sanity, to be honest. Trying to grind having seen this from other people, trying to grind these like skirmish seasons or trying to grind to 1,000 XP to be the first to get the gold foil, etc. Like, it is really taxing on people. But when you're trying to do it to get a Pro Tour invitation, and it's not, I have to get to a certain threshold, it's like if you've ever played online games before where you've got to like keep your like certain level, and you have to keep playing to keep that level, because otherwise you drop down because people's points amass above yours. It's a very tough situation to be in. And I think, Brendan, you kind of like talked about it a little bit at the start, but I think it's really important is that I'm a little bit worried about what this does to like local scenes and how people start to try and gain the XP. Like, do people collectively come together and be like, we're going to get these people invites, we're going to run events every week, we're going to run 6-round blitz events, whatever it is. I share the same sentiments of a bit of concern, and I'm a big believer in what LSS have done, but I think we've seen this kind of happen a little bit already, and there should be some, like you talked about, there should have been I guess some learnings about this kind of use of the XP system. And you talked about maybe what's the idea, what's the alternative, and I do have a couple to propose that maybe could have been done, and I can't take credit for this. A lot of these came from a conversation I had with, I don't know if he wants me to say his name, because I don't know if he wants people to... David, you know who you are. We talked about, if you want to expand the amount of invitations to allow people to come, what about expanding the amount of slots at a ProQuest? Why can't the top 4 get an invitation? You know what I mean? Why could we not use... So if the concern is about online sort of grinding, maybe online XP doesn't count for this 90-day XP count or whatever, which I understand would alienate some people who can only play online or aren't close to stores. But then what's the trade-off with the rest of the what's happening outside of that, right? So I think there is a few maybe other solutions that could have been looked at. Maybe we don't use XP at all. Maybe we don't use ELO or XP for this. We use just qualification through ProQuest or whatever it is. But yeah, and then the whole thing of like, we're already halfway through the 90 days or almost halfway through the 90 days. That's really tough for some people, and I feel for people who are going to be trying to gain that 90-day XP or are really committed to playing, but maybe they took Christmas off and didn't really play any armories in January because they're on holiday, and all of a sudden they want to get into that 90-day XP and they're chasing. So yeah, I don't really know. We could talk about this for a long time, I think, but if I'm just sort of summing it up, I'm really, really excited for the Pro Tour. When I read the announcement yesterday, I had a real adverse reaction to the eligibility and how you get an invitation, and my first thoughts were, this is really bad for the game. I think the XP system is going to be used for this Pro Tour only, in all honesty. By the time we get to the next Pro Tour, ELO will be in effect. We'll have more regions getting callings, etc. So I do understand this decision, and I understand why not using ELO. That's fine. I just am a little bit, I'm not even a little bit, I'm quite worried and concerned about what this is going to mean over the next sort of month and a half as we head towards the Pro Tour for this XP sort of system. And I'm worried about this. I really don't like this gifting idea, because of just the fact that I think this is going to result in people buying their way to the Pro Tour, which I'm not in love with. But yeah, that's my piece.
I can already do it with the gifts, but I want to tie this up with some nuance, right? Like with some just important takeaways. And that's that, like, a lot of people are really hostile about this conversation. I don't know why. I mean, I understand that there's both sides are wrong in their own way. The side that's against this is usually accused of something like entitlement, which is probably true to an extent. Like some players earn that, and they think that other people don't get to have it because they got it in a certain way that they thought was the only way. And that's fine. Like that's probably not a good way to think. But fundamentally, this doesn't hurt pro players. Most of them they have their invites. It doesn't hurt them. What it hurts is your local scene. Like it hurts the system, the integrity of the XP system, the integrity of the Pro Tour, because people are exploiting to get it, not because people who have XP and play the game a lot are getting it. That's fine. Like that's probably debatably good. It's because now it incentivizes people exploiting a very flawed system. And yeah, I just there's another argument about this is to drive sales in a local community, help foster locals, and that's fine as well. But this is definitely not what was needed to do that, and it might actually have a net negative effect on your local community because there's more on the line, right? And yeah, it's just weird. And I think that the one takeaway, the one kind of endings thing I want to say is just that it doesn't hurt me and Hayden. I think it hurts the game and the casual community more than anything. And I'm coming from from a place where I've seen this happen. I've experienced this multiple times, whether it was 1K to XP or if it was invites to Road to Nationals or skirmish seasons. I've seen it. And yeah, I think that it's important to try to understand where we're coming from when we talk about this. If your immediate reaction is to have an immense hatred to the other side of this conversation.
I'm sure we'll get some feedback on it in terms, and that's fine. Yeah. But as I say, people are entitled to their own opinion, and I think Brennan's done a much better job of being more objective than I have on this, because I think the gifting of the PTIs really rubbed me up the wrong way in terms of almost being able to basically buy your way into the Pro Tour. Whereas if I'm being a bit more objective, that probably shouldn't matter as much. But the XP thing, as Brennan says, I think the community concerns and the integrity concerns are an issue, and maybe that could have resulted in just approaching the XP system in a different way for this particular qualification period. Maybe that's all it would have maybe that's all it takes to have this probably have a different end result. But anyway, we've said enough on it. People can share their thoughts. Let us know what they think. I'm sure they will.
Yep.
All right, Brendan. Everfest is out this weekend. Moving right along. Friday release. Full spoiler is up, or full preview is up. I don't know if it's in the Fab TCG card gallery, but on FabDB, all the cards are up. You can go and start brewing and doing what you like, playing on TTS, proxying, getting ready, playing with your friends, getting ready for ProQuest season. And then Armories next week, or any events from Friday onwards. Everfest is legal, so go enjoy. Send us pictures of your Icelander deck, of your new Prism and Guardian decks. How are you building Bravo? Would love to see. So yeah, very, very cool sort of, I love when new sets come out. I love the constructed scene for the first week, because people are scrambling to get cards. People are trying out random stuff. It's such a fun environment to be in. I think especially as the ProQuest don't start for another 2 weeks. So locals and Armory seem to be really cool, and lots of wacky stuff. And yeah. Anyway, our first post Everfest and post ban and errata gameplay is now up by the time this drops. We played a classic. We played Rhinar into Bravo. I jumped on Brute for a bit of a new take on Rhinar, to a degree, new cards anyway. And we had a look at, I guess, Briar for our first take on the channel of what it looks like post-ban, post-errata. How is Briar shaping up? And, I think the deck's still very strong. But anyway, go check that out up on YouTube. Brendan, anything else from you to talk about, to plug?
All right, so just going to speed through these ones. I did talk with Chalice, the legendary Flesh and Blood cosplayer, on last week's Time in the Round, so go check that out if you're interested. This week will be Tim Bunn. You might recognize that last name. But Tim Bunn is a legend in his own right. He's actually the world champion of a game called Skytear and was quite the Netrunner player. And of course, we all know him as a marvelous Flesh and Blood player as well. So check that out. It's coming out this week. Want to shout out to Twitter Spaces. We're doing a lot of Twitter Spaces. And they've been great. They're fantastic, classroom style. We bring people up on stage, collaborative. Check it out. I highly, highly recommend you engage with that medium of content, because I'm starting to think it's the future. Final shout out here is just a thank you to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. It means so much to us, and we've just been so happy with the growth of it. But more than that, the community that we fostered. And, it's awesome to have the Arsenal Pass Discord nowadays. We do have a lot of extra content on there if you're interested, including deck text, deck guides, as well as extra podcasts. But anyway, Hayden, we're running a little tight for time. Let's head into the commanded cookout.
Yeah. fire up the grill. Yeah, I've got a shorter question this week because we are running short on time. We want to make sure we do give justice to these classes, but we might do sort of more than half next week, so that's fine. The question comes from our Patreon Discord, actually, from Professor Fennel. I don't know where he got the name from, but a big hello, Fennel, if you're, I don't know if it's Pokemon related or other podcast related, but anyway. Professor Fennel says, where are the pants? There's a helm, chest, arm, and leg slot for equipment. However, most leg slotted items are boots. In the ARPG Path of Exile, a game also developed in New Zealand, it's a good game, there's also a noticeable lack of pants slots. Could this be cultural? To be fair, in New Zealand, we do like to wear a lot of shorts and stubbies and short shorts, so maybe. Professor Finn also asks, on a more serious note, do you have any predictions on the future of equipment? Do you think LSS could ever expand the number of slots or possibly introduce attachments to add on to existing equipment slots to add modularity? Maybe armor that is charges, system for X amount of uses. Brendan, I know you're going to talk about this one. Do you have any ideas for a specific piece of armor or changes you would like to see?
Well, I've actually never thought about it that way. For some reason,
we talked about it.
No, it's kind of. I mean, now that I've heard it, it sounds like a natural evolution. If maybe right, you could expand the armor slots if you wanted to. Maybe it'd get a little too cluttered. I'm not sure, but yeah, I mean, additions, mods to armor. I think that is potentially a design space. Not sure how that actually plays out in terms of functionality, and also I'm worried about how it's represented on the board, but sounds cool and potentially. Hayden, your thoughts?
Well, we've already seen Soul, right, which modifies a board section, right, by putting cards under a hero. We've got 2 Arsenal slots now with New Horizon. Why can't something give an additional equipment spot, right? Why can't you have, I don't know, I guess we have Offhand now, which kind of maybe takes care of like the idea of like maybe you have gloves and then you have a second something, but yeah, maybe there's something. Maybe there's you have a chess piece that enables you to have an amulet which comes along with it or something. So I don't know. Could be something to explore. I really like the idea of like charges as like an X use on an equipment. So maybe an equipment has like X uses. So maybe it's like it comes into starts the game with 3 charge counters on it, and then you can instant speed give +1 to an attack action or something as a reaction or something, and then when 3 pieces are gone, it breaks. Or maybe it has a system where you defend with it, like similar to Temper, but if you defend with it, you lose a charge counter, for instance. So yeah, I don't know. I think there could be there's some really cool space to explore with equipment because it starts in play, which is like a really cool feature of Flesh and Blood, right? It's one of the most unique things that you start full with your equipment. So it's a really cool place to explore, I think. But I think also LSS have to be a little bit careful about how they explore it. You've already seen some cards that are borderline very strong in the equipment slot. We've got Mask of Momentum, we've got Bloodsheath Scarlata, we've got, New Horizon gives 2 Arsenal spots. So they do, I think, have to be careful. And I think they're playing in this wheelhouse of mostly impacting the game either at a one-time use, a interaction with like damage, whether it be arcane or physical, or in legendary slots, often this idea of like a more of a longevity piece. So I think they can play around with that a little bit. Maybe we see some changes. I really like the idea of the charge counters and would like to see that. I don't have any specific ideas of equipment I would like to see off the top of my head, but yeah, I would like to see LSS be in the future creative with the equipment slot within reason. I think they've got to be careful as well.
So with that, on to the main topic of the pod, and we're going to be talking about Everfest and its effect on class constructed and how each class is looking to shape up in this new meta. All right, Hayden, give me a little breakdown of what we're talking about.
Yep. So over the next 2 weeks, the next 2 pods, we are going to talk about each class and each hero within that in Flesh and Blood and how the Everfest is impacting class constructed. And what we're going to talk about is probably a little bit of where they've come from in the meta, where they're going to, key cards, any new archetypes, things that we are excited about personally. We're going to talk about some of the most important cards we think from Everfest that are going to have the impact on this. And then we're going to wrap it up and talk about where we find this class probably sitting, a bit of a prediction of where we think the meta is going to go in terms of a bit of a grade for that those classes and those heroes and where they sit, which I'm excited to give a little bit of a placing, a bit of a ranking, and then see how accurate we might be as we head into the ProQuest season and then onwards to the Pro Tour season. Anyway, Brendan, let's get into it. We're going to start with the big one. We're going to start with the main one. We're going to start with Runeblades. So the Runeblades have been, dominating the last 2 formats. I think that's without a doubt. It's the one that probably everyone want to tear first, so we'll start with it. Within there, of course, we've got Briar, Viscera, and Chain. We're going to kind of interweave these a little bit and talk about them as Runeblades, but talk about them separately. And then we will talk a bit more about the decks towards the end. So if we sort of go over where we're there in the last meta, well, Briar's coming from being basically the deck to beat, right, Brennan? Like this was Briar up here, whether it be Mount Heroic or Cheerios, and then you've got Viscera, which performed reasonably well within the format as well, sort of a late bloomer, and Chain, which you'd say definitely took a dip after the Seeds banning, but has been pretty solid within the meta, right?
Yeah, for sure, Hayden. I could see some people saying that Runeblade may have just been, I don't know, like the main descriptor or main topic of Flesh and Blood for a long time. It's been Runeblade, especially when it comes to competitive gameplay and the meta. So we saw a lot with Chain and Monarch, and he persisted through that ban into Tales of Aria as well, getting second at US Nationals and obviously a myriad of other places at other events. But then the tone was sort of changed to Briar, which was a very popular, but also dominant deck in that format as well. So I think that you're right. Runeblade has seen a bit of favor in the past few sets, and obviously Briar's seen her ban, which also affects Chain significantly, the predominant ban. Chain saw Seeds banned, but Viscerai almost didn't get touched. Obviously, Tempo Viscerai would love to have Plunder run, but the Viscerai deck that won Australian Nationals, I mean, that one only got upgrades.
Yeah, I think, let's talk about the cards. In terms of, I was going to say, probably just for a bit of, bit of groundwork, like the strength of these Runeblades in the last format was really their diversity, right? The split damage continues to be what drives Runeblade to be very difficult to deal with. Multiple attacks, and you've got to say it, Rosetta Thorn really gave that bump from Tales of Aria to all three of the Runeblades, and I think that split damage across the attacks and this continued ability to go wide, we saw it hit with Briar to a degree, continues to drive these Runeblades, right?
Yeah, and I think that Spellbound Creepers is also not too bad, right?
That's pretty good. So if we talk about some of the new cards that we're getting in the set, what we'll do is we'll talk about these cards and we'll talk about what we think the impact is of these cards. And we've got a few key cards for each of the classes and heroes. So we're going to start with Swarming Gloomveil, I think. So Swarming Gloomveil is the 0 cost, 3 attack. I'm not going to read the text. I will probably put these up on screen. If not, you can look these up. What do you think of this card in terms of what it's giving to Runeblades in Everfest?
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of playing this against a fellow opponent.
Who would that be?
May have won a national championship, and it's good, right? This card was particularly very, very good in Briar pre-errata, but even post-errata, it's a very good card. Obviously, you can run this in Viscera as well, but all you have to do is create that 1 aura, and you have Go Again, which is fantastic in Briar, but creating 2, which is not extremely hard, and you do get the +1, so 0 for 4, that defends for 3. That's a great weight in Runeblade. The third clause, sorry. I mean, if you can pull it off, your opponent not being able to block arcane damage from sources you control, it's a great way to finish out games, right? And probably just a great way to do damage.
Yeah, I think the fourth ability is, the fourth is a super secret ability. The third ability is kind of whatever, I think. But those first 2 abilities are really key. And Briar, I actually think Briar gets the least from this, to be honest, in terms of just what you're getting. Because you take Chain can make a Soul Shackle on turn, that's your first aura, probably very easily make a Rune Chant as well. So you probably always Go Again, but very often you're going to be able to go 4 with Go Again. So I think that's really powerful. I think Viscerai gains the most from this, though. A deck that wants to make Rune Chants, you have Viscerai's ability. If you've played a non-attack action and then you play this, you're making a Rune Chant. So you've already got natural Go Again anyway, but then maybe you play an Oath of the Arknight first. You're up to 4 plus the buff with the Go Again as well. So yeah, I think this card is really strong, 0 cost. I think we're going to see this play into all 3 decks, but I think it kind of goes Briar, Chain, Viscera in terms of the impact from bottom to top there. So yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's move on. Let's talk about Revel in Runeblood. This card is very interesting to me. This is the 0 cost Runeblade non-attack action that generates 4 Rune Chant tokens if you've played a non-attack and an attack action this turn, and it has Go Again, of course, but it does destroy all your Rune Chants at end of turn. So this to me very much speaks like a tempo card, but I think this has, again, a place in probably potentially all of the Runeblades in this format, right? You would say that, okay, we talk about Viscerai, this probably has a place more so in maybe aggressive builds more than an OTK because of that blow-up clause. You don't really want to be playing this in an OTK version. But even Cheerios, your deck is split pretty evenly between non-attacks and attacks. I don't know in Mount Heroic how much ability this has to fit in, but in maybe Cheerios versions, if those decks still exist with now Ball, Lightning, and Plunderun gone, this could maybe replace Plunderun in some way, shape, or form.
I definitely feel like you play this in Briar.
In both versions?
I mean, I think so, right? Like, it's very, very good. That being said, I mean, it's been a while since I've played the Mount Heroic, Mount Heroic Cheerios-esque one, so I have to revisit that, but it's not too hard, even in that version of the deck, to have an attack action, or a non-attack action, then an attack action. Just play this as a follow-up, get your lightning token, hit with an attack, potentially swing in the blade after. Like, that's really, really good. So, I see this as being played in most Briar decks, but maybe not like the Go Tall Earth deck.
Yeah, this seems very good to me in Cheerios, though, like in the zero cost Briar. This feels like exactly what you're looking for to replace Plunder Run in terms of your deck's 50-50, you're wanting to go often like Nimblism, Rabble, whatever, this into another attack. Or the good thing as well, this thing that's going to pay you off a lot is this into Blade is just very, very good as well. So that's often going to be the play pattern, I think, is like, yeah, you only have one attack action, has go again, but you have the Blade. And that's what I think is going to pay off a lot of the time. It works so well in that because it just, a non-attack and attack action, it plays so well into it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you that in Cheerios, this is an extremely good card. But like you said, also in Tempo Viscerai,
Chain?
I think it's going to be, Chain for sure as well. Chain is weird just in the sense that, the threshold that you needed to hit in order to have a non-attack action card without Blood Tap was really high. This seems to be on par with that power level. But, we'd really have to see how effective the 4 rune chants are to like pushing damage on your opponent when you're able to get it versus having a non-blood deck card in your deck that can just get banished and lead to you blanking. So Chain is my biggest consideration, Viscerai and Briar for sure.
Yeah, it's harder to play. Imagine if we still had Seeds around. How easy would it be to play?
Yeah, what if you had a non-attack action card that costs 0 that you could play from your banish zone?
What if you just had a non-attack action that didn't cost 2 to play from your banish, just full stop? But anyway... also very good with creepers, I think, as well. Obviously, you play the non-attack, play the attack. Maybe it doesn't have go again, but you can creepers this to get the go again, the action point as well. So I think those 2 cards are the most impactful to Runeblade. Obviously, Majestics kind of makes sense. Their power level's high. I want to talk about Runeblood Incantation next. This card is very interesting to me, and I think this has a lot of different utility uses. So this is the 1-cost Runeblade Aura, which, Aura is definitely a theme in the set. Has go again, defense for 2, and the red comes in with 3 counters on it. Yellow 2, blue 1, rah, and then at the start of each turn, you remove a counter, get a rune chant. When there's no counters left, destroy it. So this is I think this is a cool design, first of all, but a very interesting card that pays you off over turns as opposed to just giving you 3 rune chants up front.
Yeah, I feel like this is very good for Viscerai. Like this is exactly the kind of thing that you would like, right? More ways to invest in future rune chants while you play out your sort of slow, more combo-esque game plan. I think this card is fantastic in that case. Is it played in Briar and Chain? Like in Cheerios Briar? Probably not, because it costs 1. And the effect is not insane. In Chain, I don't know if I see it as well. I guess if it's really good for turning on things like, meet and greets and stuff like that. But I really see this as I'm going to be playing in Viscerai. What about you?
Yeah, I think similar. I'm not sold on this card just yet. We'll have to see how it kind of ends out and plays out. I'm not, I think it's good though. I like the design space. I think there's lots to explore with it. That every turn it leads to a lot of things you could do with it. I want to talk about a couple of other cards to round it out. I want to talk about Shrill of Skullhorn. This is the attack that gets +3 if you've played an Aura this turn. And so it's base attacks 4 red, cost 2. This is a really interesting one because it could be a 2 cost for 7, which is really powerful and I think very easy to do. Chain is kind of the deck that I think this fits into naturally, but again, your spots with no blood debt are so tight. But the fact that this is always going to be 2 for 7 in that deck, or even the blue could be an option. You're going to be playing 2 for 5. That's quite a good payoff. But even in Viscerai potentially or other decks, I just think this card is the power level isn't as high, but it's consistent, and that really intrigues me.
Yeah, I can see the blue for 2 for 7 at red. I wonder. If that's good enough for Chain. Just because Chain doesn't really play too many 2-cost attack actions, one really being Command and Conquer. So I think the criteria for a 2-cost attack action is pretty high. But Hayden, I want to quickly talk about a card that actually wasn't in our notes, and that's going to be Drowning Dire, because I think this card is pretty powerful. So Drowning Dire, if you've created an Aura, it gains Dominate. But the 2 is for, the red one is 2 for 5. And if you have if it hits, you're able to put a non-attack action card from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck, which doesn't sound crazy. But in the context of Runeblade having some of those broken non-attack actions that exist, it's pretty good. Like, if you think about playing Viscerai, a lot of the time, the point when you really run out of gas is when you run out of things like Mordred Tide, and those are huge turns. Being able to put a Mordred Tide on the bottom of my deck, which I think is one of the most powerful non-attack actions in the game, that sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I think Viscerai would be the home for this card, if any, because Briar and Chain already have access to this effect in a better form, I think. You've got, rights in... both have the rights, right? The two different rights. Plus, you've got So Tomorrow in Briar. So yeah, I think it's interesting. It hasn't piqued my interest maybe as much as it has you, but I think if there's a reason why you need to start playing maybe anti-fatigue cards in Viscerai, maybe because you're playing more aggressive Viscerai, then this could be a sideboard option, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to talk about Vixen Quillhand. This is the Runeblade Majestic Equipment, the arm slot that breaks to give 2 rune chance and go again as an action, and has Arcane Barrier 1, doesn't defend. This card's cool. When I saw this card, I was like, this is a really... First of all, I love the art, but also this is just a really cool card in terms of a one-use, give you 2 rune chance, but has Arcane Barrier, because we haven't seen as many of these. We have Bullseye Braces and Ranger, but we haven't seen as many with like Arcane Barrier and an effect, a one-time effect. So yeah, I think this card's really cool. I think this is going to obviously just be an upgrade on Null Ring Gloves if you're playing in the deck. Probably now becomes the default piece of Null Arcane Barrier rather than the Crown for most Runeblade decks. And then also just this one-time use is really strong, especially in aggressive decks. So I think this is going to probably see play, first of all, as a piece of Arcane Barrier, but then potentially in really aggressive decks could just be default over Grasp of the Arknight, where you want the 2 damage as opposed to the 3 defense over 2 and 1.
Yeah, I think about this card in the context of Chain Mirrors and what kind of role it would have played there. Because often you would actually choose not to have the Arcane Barrier just because the armor that you could play over it was so powerful. So yeah, I really like this card. And like you said, there's not really too much to analyze in the sense that in most situations, it's going to be a strict upgrade to Null Rune Gloves.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Another Majestic for us, Runic Reclamation, rather. Is a 3-cost 7 power Majestic. It says if it hits a hero, you may destroy an aura they control, and if you do, create a rune chant. Very cool ability. The kind of natural is like very good against Prism, right? A card that works well into Prism. But even like into, maybe other Runeblades where you're attacking into and breaking their incantations or breaking their rune chants. This card is very interesting to me. I think this is a card that we're going to see essentially played as just like a kind of a targeted slot, more of a sideboard slot. But I actually think this card has a lot of wide utility, especially as more auras come into the game. And we've seen some auras printed in this set, of course, whether it be in classes or across the generics. So yeah, I think this is an interesting card. It also can break soul shackles, can do a lot of things.
Yeah, I think if you ever played Ninth Blade of the Blood Oath as an anti-prism card in Runeblade, you've got an upgrade here. Obviously not counting Viscerai, plays that main deck, but I think about the times when I played Chain and I just threw that thing in my deck because I didn't want to die to Herald Prism. Well, this is Ninth Blade in that deck, but with an upside, you can actually, it's a pretty significant upside against something like a Prism. So I think it's a great card, and it's going to immediately be a staple for that matchup, at least.
Yeah, definitely something that I have my eye on, especially if I'm playing, like you say, Viscerai or probably certain Briar decks, like, heroic Briar decks. I think it's really interesting. But even into Chain as an option, I think it's really, it's one I'm going to definitely look at. It's on the radar. Reek Corruption. I want to talk about this card last. This is the 2-cost. If you've created an aura this turn and Reek Corruption hits, the opponent discards a card. I think this is just a worse consuming volition, to be honest. It costs 1 extra for 1 extra power and a slightly different wording. It's an aura created as opposed to arcane damage. So it's a little bit harder to prevent the trigger, obviously, but it's you can still defend it out. So I'm not in love with this card.
Does consuming block for 2? I think it does.
No, defense for 3.
Blocks for 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw this card. 2 for 4. I don't know if that really does it for me, but we'll see. Its potential, like any kind of like extra disruption in Runeblade, is pretty nice because I felt like we were already really stretching to get that sometimes. So this could be another tool in the toolbox for decks that don't want to interact with you. Particularly, like something like Bolton. This could be decent against if Bolton Sabers comes back. Next card here is a funny card, Hayden. Amulet of Assertiveness. So this is the one.
The yellow attack reaction with Go again. And when you hit banish the top card of your deck. If it's an attack action card, you may play it this turn, but you can only activate Amulet of Assertiveness attack reaction if you have 4 more cards in hand. So basically, you've played an attack from Arsenal, or you've had maybe 5 cards at the start of the turn. So it's I put this one in because I think this is if I'm thinking about where this could go, like Cheerios Briar is the one that kind of stands out to me. It's yellow, so it's maybe a little bit awkward, but the ability that this has to potentially be, effectively an extra card. So you play it on one turn. It has Go again, which is great. It's a non-attack action for your embodiment of lightning, and then later down the track, it could turn into an extra card, an extra attack action, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about the other amulet that effectively functions like Command and Conquer, and that was what I thought when I was first reading this. For some reason, I was kind of blanked, but I saw it. This is obviously a tangent. I saw a hilarious meme where it's like, "Mom, can we have Command and Conquer?" And it's like, "No, we have the amulet at home." And it's just so accurate.
It's called the Amulet of Disruption. I don't know. I feel like that's what it should be called. I don't know if that's actually what it's called, but yeah, I know the one you mean. I think that card is fine. I think I don't know. This one speaks to me as more of like a power. Like this has some really high ceiling for creating some big turns with something like a Cheerios Briar. But anyway, move us on. Brendan, what do we got next?
For sure. So finished off on the Runeblade cards here. I want to talk to you, Hayden, about are these cards opening any other archetypes? I think specifically, one of the ones that jumps out to me. I know this isn't one that's on your list. Is something like Drowning Dire. Potential to have maybe a more go tall strategy and something like Viscerai, which we haven't really seen outside of single attack actions like Ninth Blood Oath or Arcanite Ascendancy. The idea of playing a Oath of the Arcanite into Drowning Dire, although the resource to do that is a bit rough, seems really cool, right? You get to dominate 100%, and you also get to recycle one of those very powerful non-attack actions onto the bottom of your deck, whether it be Mordred Tide or Become the Arcanite or something like that.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I was just going to say on that archetype, I think one of the things we've kind of left to the wayside, it hasn't been talked about in a while, is you have a card, especially in Viscerai, Arcanite Ascendancy. I almost forgot the name, which we haven't seen be played in for a very long time, the Majestic. And there's a few buffs in this set as well, albeit one of them even bigger than that is an instant, so it's maybe not as nice as non-attack action. But yeah, I think there's... sorry, that's definitely not what I meant to say. Not that card. What I meant was the one that destroys items and gets the buff. But yeah, in terms of other archetypes, I think this idea of like more aura-based sort of auras matters is really interesting, and how those kind of interact. Like whether that be we're playing Revel and Runeblood in non-Viscerai decks because it creates auras that then trigger other things, like the Gloom Veil, like maybe the Reek of Corruption. So I don't know if we're going to see much of a shift in terms of archetypes. I think that aggressive-based Viscerai decks become maybe more viable, or that tempo strategy becomes better with some of these cards we get. I think, bannings were impacted Briar, but I think Mountain Rock Briar, for instance, is still very good. So, yeah.
Well, important to talk about that is like coming in, regardless of what some of these heroes are getting in Everfest, probably the most significant change to the meta is actually going to be the bannings and errata surrounding, a lot of Briar's cards, which are also Chains cards and Viscerai. So Plunder Run, and then the Ball Lightning for Briar specifically, and Briar's errata. I think that's going to have the largest impact on the game, actually potentially more than any card that's printed in Everfest. So, really interesting to keep that at the front of your mind as you look for what's really going to be the best deck moving into the next format.
So on that note, moving on to things that I think people want to know from us, which is how do we see these three competing in the format? How would we rank them? And we'll end with our sort of grading on these. But how would we play these right now as well? So think about Runeblades right now. First of all, which Runeblade do you think you would play, and how would you play it? And what about the other two that you maybe would have next on your list?
For sure. So I would definitely play Viscerai, with the caveat that I think it's going to be a heavily saturated Prism meta. And traditionally, that's been a very bad matchup for him. So I would wonder if the new 7 power cost that blows off auras is good enough. I would suspect that it's maybe not. It's still going to be a rough matchup. But if I have that card in addition to some other new cards that have been printed in my deck as Viscera, can I actually play a tempo game plan against Prism and eventually win out? I think that the Viscera deck was extremely strong in the last format, and it's only seen upgrades with Everfest coming out. That being said, I think other other decks as well, particularly decks that it was not very good against, saw better upgrades. So Briar, probably still good, but I don't think it's going to be, having sort of a stranglehold on the meta like it used to. And I would not play the new Chain just because I genuinely don't like the new playstyle of Chain that we've kind of seen him build. Seen like that's the way he's been built recently, like the less blood debt. I'm not a fan of it, so I'd be looking at Viscera, and that's actually one of the top decks I'm looking at. Just not even just in Runeblade, but
in total
with all the in total.
Yeah, so I think Briar, which you didn't mention there, I think Mount Heroic actually you get some tools, right? And there's some ways that you can build. Yeah, we lose Plunder Run, but that was less important for Heroic. You lose Ball Lightning, but there's you got Swarming Gloomveil as another attack that has go again. I think there's things in here that I guess still going to mean that Briar is very good, and it's probably going to be important that it's good because of Prism. Prism seems to be getting a lot of upgrades, and that's one of the things that is a concern for me with like Viscera. I mean, obviously I love that deck. Just played it at Nationals and would like to continue to play it in some way, shape, or form. I think it maybe changes a little bit. I would probably be building it maybe a little bit less OTK focused, but that's only so I could try and beat Prism. But I think, Briar is, if you're worried about Prisms, for instance, Briar might be the option. Bravo as well. Bravo is also traditionally a tough matchup for Viscera, to be honest, so it'd be interesting. They get a lot of tools as well. But it's probably going to be a Prism and Guardian meta to a degree, so I think you have to take that into consideration. Anyway, want to give some grades on these in terms of where I think these heroes are going to shake out as we head into the Everfest meta. And it's important to note these grades we're giving really about where we see the kind of like the strengths. So like, have they gained tools? Have they not gained tools? Have they gotten worse? Have they gotten better? And where they sit within that. So I'm going to give Briar a B+. I think Briar is, despite the bannings and the erratas and what it's lost, I think it's gone from like an A+ or an A to like a B+ in this new meta. I'm going to give Viscera the same. I think Viscera is strong, and I really like that deck, and I think there's more tools to add and adapt that deck now. Chain, I'm going to give a C. I completely agree with you, Brendan. I think that Chain is the worst affected by what we get in Everfest in terms of it basically gets very little and also got hit quite significantly by the Plunder Run. And it was already, to be fair, I think not that strong.
Yep, so I'm completely in line with you. Same grades on both Briar and Chain. I would rate Viscera a little bit higher at an A-, which, maybe doesn't make a lot of sense in the context that I'm sitting next to the Australian national champion who piloted Viscera, but I think that deck is extremely powerful. I don't know how much Guardian there will be in the meta, because I think that a Prism Guardian meta is a little bit of an oxymoron, because Prism, the deck that, the Control Prism deck tends to be very good against Guardian, so there's got to be some sort of equalization in a third deck that will push Prism down, but I think that Guardian can exist on like a 50-50 split with Prism in a normal meta. So I think that, I'm looking at Viscera. Honestly, it's one of my top decks that I want to pick. The only thing that stops me from playing Viscera, the only caveat I have, is that we're back in the Monarch meta, or at least the philosophy of the Monarch meta, where it's like, you don't want to be good against Prism, you want to destroy Prism, and the deck you want to play.
That's the concern I have as well. But there's testing to be done, there's things to work out, and we'll see what happens. I also think that, I go back to Briar and Viscera within that. Anyway, we talked about Guardian. Let's move on to our second class that we're going to talk about in these Everfest deep dives. We're going to talk about Guardian. We've got a new hero to talk about as well within this. So, of course, Old-Time Bravo, and now Bravo, star of the show. Where were we in the last meta? Well, Old-Time ended up being one of the top decks in the meta, right? We saw it, really put up a really strong performance in Australia, New Zealand Nationals. A lot of decks on day 2. It was in both finals of Australia and New Zealand Nationals. It was the final in the Hong Kong Regional Championship. We saw this deck really come out in a big way after the US Nationals, and has continued to just get better and better in terms of the control deck that I guess really preyed on Briar, right? And then you have Bravo, which was, I think ebbed and flowed on where it was in the meta. It's people were playing more aggressive builds, less aggressive builds. I think Bravo's always been there, but it definitely was under Old-Time in the last meta, right?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, like the cool thing about the last meta is I think that the move towards Oldhim was like a very sort of intelligent switch by the meta. I think that deck was very good against Briar, which was obviously popular. Bravo as well was decent. I think we saw a little bit less Bravo than Oldhim. But yeah, especially in the addition of some of these new cards, I think the stock of these decks has definitely gone up in this meta, except for potentially more Prism, which is probably a caveat we're going to have a lot.
Yep, we'll talk about that. So let's start with Bravo start of the show. Like we've seen the full set. Initially, we speculated on Bravo and what that might look like. What do you think of this hero now? What is your first take on Bravo start of the show as we head into an Everfest constructed meta? What are people going to do with it?
So it's a bit complicated, right? Because it's hard to wrap your head around that hero ability. It seems a bit funky, but it is going to have access to the largest card pool in the game. So, I mean, that brings us into some sort of theoretical territory where I don't know how correlated that is with power level, but it's definitely non-zero. So I think that that's a good thing. His ability, how consistent it will be, I have no clue. But once he pulls, like if he's pulling it off, even a few times in the game, it's so devastating and powerful that maybe that's enough.
Yeah.
What about you, Hayden?
Yeah, it's so unknown, I think. So we can take a benchmark of Bravo, original Bravo, right? Welcome to Bravo, and say, well, he can play in a similar way. But we don't have the dominate mechanic. But we have access to this really wide card pool. So what can we do with Bravo? Is there a sort of amalgamation between old time and Bravo? And this is where Bravo Star of the show sits. Or, could he be a control deck? Could he be an aggro deck? There's so much that Bravo could do. I mean, we saw old time be played in an aggressive and a defensive manner. So it's really open. I think the hero ability is... I don't think you're going to build a deck that exploits this hero ability. I think you're going to build a deck that uses this hero ability 1 to 2 times a game when the hand lines up, and it's probably going to be driven through a card like Pulsive Eisenloft, to be honest, or Pulsive Candlehold. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with that. I think probably this is going to take a while to figure out Bravo style of the show. But let's talk about some of the cards that we get from Everfest, because there's a lot of Guardian cards. I think it might have been the class that got the most from the set in terms of just pure card numbers, because we get the Legendary and stuff as well. But let's start with Nerves of Steel. This is the 3-cost Guardian action aura that when it comes into play, so it removes a -1 counter from a chest equipment you control, and Battle Worn and Temper equipment you control don't trigger if they're defending an attack with 2 or less attack. So really, first of all, the first thing I think it was really interesting against Dash without Plasma Purifier, so maybe it's actually not that interesting. But really, this feels like the anti-Benji card, to be honest. And I don't know how much impact this card is going to have in Classic Constructed.
That's really interesting that you say that, because I think that you're right. Like, the first things that a lot of us are going to think about is the Dash Pistol at 2, or something like Ninja with Kadachis. And that's a use case, whether it's good enough for that use case. If it does enough in that situation, I don't know. But what I'm really interested for is this good enough against just like a Briar deck? Or maybe not Kadachis, but on the later down that combat chain, you're blocking a Whelming Gust Wave or something like that. Like helping block significant hit triggers while not losing your armor, because we all know how important armor is as a resource that you manage throughout the game. So I think the power level on like ceiling on this could be really high, but I could also just be kind of overplaying it.
This feels to me, and I can't take credit for this, I think Tarek might have said this. It feels like a card that is here to balance what could be an issue with Benji in terms of just the power of that deck and Blitz, and the fact that you could probably just build like a 1-turn kill deck with Benji now with the specialization and all the card draw and stuff. It kind of feels like a bit of a balance card to me. It doesn't really feel like a card I'm ever going to want to play. Also, this breaks if you dealt damage. So as soon as you dealt damage, this breaks. So yeah, good on Kadachis, good on maybe Plasma Purifier without... particular Plasma Pistol without the Plasma Purifiers. But outside of that, I think the use case is like I'm racking my brain in this format, and it's like, right now it's not something. Maybe Ninjas default to these, these 2-cost cards, these 2-attack cards, 3-attack cards with 100 win lines. But yeah, I don't really see this card having much of an impact. So I'm ready to move on. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the Legendary. Let's talk about Stalagmite, Bastion of Eisenloft. So we have a Guardian Legendary. It's an offhand shield in this. It's the one we've been teased. The art is awesome. And it's whenever it defends... Sorry, I can't even read the card. Whenever you defend with Stalagmite, create a Frostbite token under the attacking player's control. And it has Temper, and it has 2 defense. So you get 2 uses out of it, and they get a Frostbite. This card is interesting, right? Because you already have the other weapon... the other offhand shield, which you can use throughout the whole game, and is great in all-time decks. But maybe, in Bravo Star of the Show, where you don't have this hero ability, maybe you're not even running Crown Seeds, maybe it's a completely different deck. This is really interesting, and also potentially in aggressive decks where you get to a shorter game and you just get 2 uses out of this, swing tempo with the Frostbite. Yeah, I don't know. I think this card is good. It's just a very different style to what we've seen so far.
I mean, I think you got close to the point there when you were talking about the latter, which is in an aggressive or maybe kind of a mid-range style deck where you're using this as a way to tempo your opponent out, or maybe you're only going to have those 2, 3, 4 turns for the entire duration of the game, in which a Frostbite on 50% of those turns is massively impactful. So I think it's good, but I don't think it's like a fatigue weapon, which is probably pretty clear to most people. In other decks, it could be a strict upgrade to the other shield that's available.
Yeah, I really like the idea of this with an aggro Bravo, like Star of the Show or old time deck, pairing it with, I guess, the only weapon you can, which is the one-handed weapon. But I think this could be interesting. I think it's good. I think it's one of the best of the Guardian cards we get. Spoiler for the rest of these cards, I'm not a big fan of what we get with Guardian. I think the overall kind of gain that Guardian gets is maybe not as big as this. Is a lot of cards and some cool stuff, and I think there's some new archetypes, but I don't know if like the power level is as high as maybe I thought when I first saw some of these cards. Anyway, with that, I want to talk about Steadfast. So Steadfast is the Guardian instant. This is 3 cost and says prevent the next 6 damage at red, and then drops down from there. That would be dealt to you this turn by a source of your choice. Really interesting card. Guardian traditionally plays defense reactions and relies on those cards more. What's really interesting is this card does cost 3, so it works with like Anathos and stuff like that. There's a few different things this card can do. And potentially really good against Arcane from a Wizard, for instance, because of, just plays out better than Arcane into big turns. What's your kind of thoughts on this card? Like, where do you see this card having a place in Guardian?
Yeah, I hate it. Oh, God.
It's like Blessing, right? It's like the one that came before.
Yeah, there's one that was created in Crucible that wasn't played that did something pretty similar.
Or something. Blessing Serenity?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah. So I hate this card because I don't think it's actually particularly good for most of the things Guardian's trying to do, but I think that it's very punishing to other decks. Specifically Wizard. This card is miserable to play against, probably. But also, if you are being fatigued by a Guardian, you're trying to set up like a big combo turn, this does make that harder. I just don't see this thing being interesting outside of fatigue, and I hate fatigue. So, I mean, they're 3 for 6 can be a good block, if you are in kind of a Bravo mirror, so it's maybe has some use case there. But yeah, I'm just not a fan from a standpoint that I think it could be maybe hurtful to other decks. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, what advantage does this have over a defense reaction in most Bravo lists, except for against Arcane?
I guess not much, right? So you've got your 3 for 6. That's going to be standard. This has to be a single source of damage. So
one thing it can do is it can stop Sonata from triggering your Rattlebones, so that you can't Rattlebones a 9th Blade straight away. That's That's about what I could see. So, and then the Wizard aspect.
Right?
Less excited.
Yeah, less excited.
Imposing Visage. It's a cool design. This is the X and 3 cost, so it costs you 3 plus X, and then it lets you go and search your deck for an aura, put into play where the cost is X. So if you want to go and get like a Showtime or a 3 cost aura like Stamp Authority, it's going to cost you 6. If you want like Frigid, it's going to cost you 5, for instance, and it has Go Again on the card, so it effectively gives you Go Again where playing that aura would not give you Go Again all the time with something like a Showtime, which is really interesting. It's blue and defense for 3. What's your kind of... I know, like, we couldn't read this card at first. There was a lot of speculation on this card. Now that you know exactly what it does, had time to think about it, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think it's really good, actually. Specifically for the use case that you talked about there. I think there's more that you can do with it as well. But you can picture yourself grabbing a Showtime, paying 6 for this, and then being able to swing your hammer and Arsenal, you get off Showtime. I think that's very good.
Yeah, I agree. I think the card has got good utility, and I think utility pieces are really important. They always have higher ceilings, and I think it looks very good in Guardian. Probably any any deck where you're looking at just having a few auras, it's probably fits in nicely, especially in Bravo decks. But I think also, we'll talk about this in archetypes, I think there might be, I've talked about Aura Guardian, I think this might be a legitimate archetype, and this card plays really well into that for getting the right one that you need for that turn, whether it's one that creates a seismic, whether it's one that gives you +3, whether it's emerging dominance, whatever. It can help you set up these really big turns. So speaking of big turns, next is Pulverize, which is, I think, a really cool card and one of my favorite cards in the set so far, just because it's massive. And it has the new mechanic Heave, which I think is really cool. So it's the 10 cost, Majestic, 14 attack, Guardian attack action with Heave 3. And when it hits a hero, so not Crush, when it hits a hero, their first attack during the next turn gets -4.
It's cool, right? I like Heave, like you said. Cool mechanic. Being able to utilize that, that blue in your hand that's left over, put this in your arsenal, invest into the next turn. I like that. I like that concept in theory in Flesh and Blood. The whole investing into your next turn hasn't really played out in the last year or so, as we've been in a hyper aggressive format. But this card has a lot of utility outside of that, and obviously the format's potentially slowing down. So you play it for the Heave cost. This goes into your arsenal. You get your Seismic Surge tokens. You go over to your next turn. Maybe you're playing Bravo. It does cost 7, so it's not just going to be an easy 2 blues, but you do have a 7 cost, pitch 3 blues, use the last 2 to use Bravo's ability, or potentially pummel this if you have that card as well somehow. I think it's great. It's good. It's high power. It's fun. I don't think it's going to see a lot of play.
Yeah, I mean, just at base value, it's 14 plus -4, right? So it's 18 damage swing in certain roundabout sort of way if you look at it. I think this card is powerful. I think Heave is interesting because you can also play around Heave as the opponent, now put a lot of pressure on my opponent while they've got this Heave card that's clearly coming in next turn. And this card can cause you some issues, right? Like, it's really hard to cast. If you get trapped in your arsenal, it could be a disaster. But yeah, I really like the card, and I think it's going to see play. If I'm looking at this card, it's more of a build around card. But the 18 kind of damage net is massive and can't be understated. We've got a Fable. We get the Guardian Fable. So I think this is one of the strongest Fables we've seen, to be honest. So it's legendary. It's a gem. Doesn't defend. It's a Guardian only, and it says when you pitch it, create a Seismic Surge, which another aura we've seen, another aura creation, and just really strong for delaying that. So you can pitch this to you activate your chess piece, get a seismic, get 2 seismics. You're already 2 resources in for next turn, plus use the resources you have now to pay for a card. So I think this card is going to see play in probably most of the Guardian decks. I don't think all, because some of them are playing like Zealous Beltings or stuff where you don't necessarily want that seismic over that turn. You'd rather the resources or hit a cost count is more important. But I think this has a lot of strength in terms of what it gives you over setting up those 2 turns. And this with Heave is fantastic, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of Fables haven't seen too much play. Like most of these play in Kano, Heart of Fyndal. We saw it on the national stream, but I would say it's a bit niche at that. It has a good use case. Other than that, we don't really see a lot of Fables played. This one, I think this one's going to see play for sure. It seems very, very good in Guardian.
Yep. So any new archetypes? I mean, we talked about Bravo Star of the Show and what that looks like. I think this aura-based Guardian deck is looking a lot more viable. There's so many ways to set up big turns, and now, especially in Bravo Star of the Show, you have access to the auras that you had previously from old time, right? From Guardian and Tales of Aria that create seismics. Maybe the Earth-based like Star of the Show deck, or even in old time. It just feels like there's more opportunity to do these big setup turns now. You've got Fable, you've got Heave, you've got all these tools plus what you had before with like Embolden, and maybe you even play the 2-cost 1 from Arcane Rising that prevents 4 damage, Chanting Melody. Like there's lots of things you can do, so I'm excited to see what that looks like. I haven't brewed anything up yet, but I will. Definitely.
Yep, I'm totally aligned with you, but I would say I would bring myself back to earth by saying that we've been talking about Aura Guardian for so long, and it seems to have not found its way into the game quite yet, or at least into the meta, but it did get a lot of tools. You're absolutely correct.
So how do you see the 3 heroes shaping up then? And let's again talk about how we'd probably build these and what we'd be looking at, and then we'll give our grades. I think Old Time feels maybe a little bit less relevant than it did in the previous meta, just with the changes to Briar and Cheerios Briar. Maybe we're going to see very, very little of it. with what it lost. We'll see some heroic and probably still good. It is the defensive deck of the format, right? That's what it has been. I think it will continue to be that. But as Prism potentially and looks like it's going to rise in stock, Old Time gets a little bit scary. Maybe you look at like the Matt Rogers build. Maybe that's where you look to. What do you think about Old Time? These cards?
Yeah, it's really yeah, for sure. I echo what you say, but I want to emphasize that it's really hard to talk about Guardians and specifically Old Time without the context of Prism, which obviously just got some of the craziest upgrades out of any of the decks, as well as is benefiting from the bans and erratas that have been targeted at decks like Briar. So, Oldhim, honestly, I think that it will be significantly less relevant in this metagame, or at least the version that we know it by.
Yeah, I agree. Bravo, start of the show, not much more to say on that. Be interesting to see what comes out of it. Bravo, yeah, I think it's going to be very similar to where I was in the last format, just kind of a bit more of a fringe deck. We see it come out because of the ability to be aggressive in the dominate. Maybe we actually see it rise. It could maybe Old Time drops, Bravo comes up, but then it's really about where does the star of the show kind of fit in that. And look, I'm going to say I think the auras, there's some powerful stuff in there. I think there's something that can be done, and it probably sits with one of the two Bravos in terms of how you build it.
We got to keep in mind that Dash is back on the menu as well. There obviously was a generic item printed that can destroy items. Is that good enough? Historically, pretty much everything that we've given Bravo has just never been good enough to beat Dash. Like we had the shield and people making funny memes about Dash being dead or whatever.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's not like that. It wasn't good enough. Dash could still really give. Yeah, just absolutely destroy Bravo. So we'll see, right? Like Dash is back on the menu. So if Prism and Dash are are really represented in this meta, it's going to be a tough time for Guardian.
Yeah, I have some things to say about Dash, and we're going to get to that next. But wrap it up with Guardian. I'm going to give Old Time I'm actually going to drop this. I'm going to give Old Time a B. I think it's going to drop, to be honest. I think we're going to sit around a B. I had originally thought a B+. Talking through with Brendan now, I think I'll give it a B in this new format. Bravo, I think I'm honestly sitting about a C, and then Star of the Show, I'm going to give a C+, because I think probably has more upside than non-talented Bravo, but we'll see.
Yeah, so again, in the context of there being Prism and Dash, I'm actually mostly Prism. I'm gonna give Oldhim maybe a C+. I really don't believe in that deck existing, or just kind of really powering through the Prism meta. Bravo, potentially, right? It's a more aggressive oriented Bravo. We saw it get close to that version back in Monarch, and I think it can really lean into that a bit more. So I'll go ahead and give it we'll give it a C plus as well, right out there with Oldhim. And then, yeah, Star of the Show, I don't even know how to give it a grade, but I'll go ahead and echo yours as well. So C plus, which is interesting because on the aggregate, I think we're rating Guardians pretty low when they had a good time in the last meta. But they don't have good times in Prism metas, and that's where we're headed.
That's the thing, right? If you take away Prism from our discussion of these, I think my grades jump up like a full grade. Like Oldhim still looks like one of the best decks in the format. Bravo, Star of the Show looks really powerful. Guardian got stuff from this, but as I said, I'm less excited about it than I am for other classes, and just the meta shift feels like it's going to be net negative for Guardians overall. So yeah, it could be wrong, right? We could see that there's a bunch of really good aggressive decks that just put Prism out of the format, and then Guardian comes back into the format or stays in the format and does a good job against those or whatever. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see, but that's kind of where we see it right now. Let's talk about Mechanologist, and we only have one here, of course, Dash. When we talk about class constructed, Dash kind of didn't really exist in the last meta in terms of, Lightning Briar really pushed it out. We saw Dash in the previous meta and the chain meta to an extent, but that was like, it was like a kind of people fatigued with it for a bit and then couldn't fatigue with it once people learned the game plan, kind of went out of the format a little bit. We saw it top 8 in Vegas, and then we didn't really hear much of it after that. Really, there was a bit of hype around maybe it would be good, and then Lightning Briar comes along and says, no, sit back down. And then, that's kind of where we've been. We've just not seen much Dash.
So, for sure. I think it's a really cool thing to talk about because we joke about Prism being popular, which you probably will, specifically because it won a national championship in a meta where it was actually not looked at as
a national championship, of course.
National champion was particularly not looked at as a very good deck, in the context of Briar being super popular. But if you think, like, if you want to talk about the impact of Briar getting banned and Plunderone getting banned, and these Runeblades going down in stock, obviously except for Viscerai, the deck that people are really going to go back to first is Dash, because I know there is a significant amount of people that want any excuse in the world to go back into their garbage bin, find that dash deck, dust it off, and go assemble Exodia on the people at their locals.
Yeah, I mean, garbage bin. I think Dash is like coming out of Crucible. I think Dash is a good hero to have in this game because of what it does. It's a good test for decks. It does this repetitive thing. Its damage is very even over turns, but in a way that is more bite-sized, right? And it doesn't have on-hit effects. So it's almost like people talk about Briar and what that deck did in the previous format, where it had like consistent damage and on-hit effects. Well, Dash doesn't do that, but it doesn't fatigue easy. It has more of a long game in mind. It can play defensive elements. It can play aggressive elements. It's a really interesting hero and archetype to have. So with that said, let's talk about some of the new cards and where we think we see Dash sort of ending up in this new meta. And I think we have to start with Dissolution Sphere, because I think this card is probably the most interesting to me personally. So this is the 2-cost at yellow Mechanoligist action item, and it enters the arena with a steam counter on it. And at the beginning of your action phase, destroy the sphere unless you remove a steam counter. And then whenever your hero will be dealt exactly 1 damage, prevent it while it's in play. So effectively, you play this, it's going to have a steam counter on it. Next turn, you remove the steam counter, but it's going to stick around for 2 of your opponent's turns and prevent exactly 1 damage from each source. So, Rune Chance, for instance.
Oh, Rune Chance, yeah. Woo, fun. Yeah, so that's rough for Viserai, but I think that the way Viserai was playing into that deck anyway was tempo-oriented. So
that's actually hard, though.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely hard. So it's not, I'd look at this card and it would look like a combo killer for that Viserai combo, but ultimately I think the Viserai will adjust and kind of just lean in more to its mid-range or aggressive strategy. Obviously, this is incredible versus Kadachi's. If you've ever been on the wrong side of a Zen State token, you know how tilting that can be. So fantastic card.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, at most, I think it'll be in, or at the least, I think it'll be in every Dash's sideboard.
Yeah, very easy. So you talk about Zen State, hard to set up, tough to set up the Zen State.
Yeah,
much easier just to play a sphere, put into play, and then pass the turn. You have Spark of Genius to get it as well. Maybe you sit the sort of Spark of Genius in Arsenal until the Viserai wants to combo, or until like it looks like your opponent has a 5-card hand on Ninja, whatever it might be. This card's interesting, and what it does is I think a really cool effect, a cool balance to the format. I actually think when you talk about Viserai, I mean, if you play this and you're playing a tempo plan, all of a sudden your opponent plays this. This is still really annoying. It's really good against 4 power as well, because opponent comes in with a 4 power attack. Okay, I block with a 3 power card. I would leak a damage, but Sphere says I don't. So the card isn't just for things like arcane damage or 1 damage effects. It also works well on things coming in for like the important breakpoint of 4, because it's going to prevent that. Or hey, my opponent's coming in with a Whelming Gust Wave for 4 here. I have a defense reaction, and now they can't Ancestral Empowerment, or maybe they have the arms up, and that doesn't work because the sphere is going to prevent the damage. So yeah, this card's really interesting to me.
Didn't think about that. I'm not going to lie. And in the context of that, geez, that's really good. Wow, this is going to be an extremely annoying card. I was about to tell you a scenario. I was like, Hayden, think about this. I'm playing Aggro Boost Dash. I go up against a Katsu. I start with this item and play. Pretty annoying. Especially in terms of turning off Mask. Wow, this card is really, really good. Blocking for 3, stopping the 4. Oof. I wonder if this card is going to be too good. Jeez, maybe I'm missing something, but this card, it seems extremely powerful.
Disruptive cards tend not to be amazing, like in terms of they never seem to break that ceiling so far. You'd say Command & Conquer is maybe like the exception, but it's a generic, it's an attack, its base stats are still strong. Whereas most of the other like disruptive cards, Chains of Eminence, we talk about that card a lot, hasn't really done much. Some of the other disruptive elements I feel like we've seen in this game so far just haven't been as maybe strong as like, the old adage we talk about with like how good Red in the Ledger is, or like Sleep Dart every turn. Like these cards seem fantastic in theory, but they never seem to be as strong as maybe more of a proactive card would be in most situations.
You're absolutely correct. I'm gonna
retract your last statement.
No, I'm gonna put my reputation on the line. Hey, I'm gonna say this card's gonna be good.
Cool.
It's gonna be good.
I hope so. I want it to be. Let's move on. Rotary Ram. I think we can be pretty quick about this one. It is effectively another buff, non-attack buff for dash, but it does go back to the bottom of your deck, so it can really help with mech boost decks, aggressive boost decks that could potentially fatigue themselves. So that's cool. I forgot the Locked and Loaded is the one from Arcane Rising. So, very similar to Locked and Loaded, except instead of the opt effect, you get this to the bottom of your deck, which is cool. I like it.
Yep. Not much to say on that. Like you said, it is freaking incredible in the pistol boost dash.
Incredible might be a bit slow down. It's good though.
Good. It's a staple. You're probably going to play him. Yep. But onto a more exciting card with T-Bone.
Yeah.
Which is the one.
Sorry, I just again got to give a quick shout out to the Attack Action podcast for their preview video when they released this. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so it's if you control a card on the combat chain that has been boosted or that was boosted, the defending hero must defend T-Bone with equipment they control if able. So this is the same effect as Magnetic
Shockwave.
Magnetic Shockwave, right?
Kind of. The cool thing about this with T-Bone is it triggers off itself, right? So this card is very good. I think the blue is like an auto-include in basically all the dash decks, whether you're aggro, whether you're not. Because if you come on just with I have extra blues in my hand, I come on with T-Bone, it's boosted, and they have to throw equipment at it. It's such a good trade for you. But even like late game, these are going to do some work when your opponent might not want to, like they only have Tunic left, or they have one defense left on important equipment that they can't then use, maybe a temper equipment, for instance. So I think with the amount of equipment and the spread we have now, it's not as effective as if this had been in previous formats where there's a lot of like people using like cards like Goliath Gauntlet or Snapdragon Scalers, etc. Because good to keep in mind is that I could just block with the Snapdragon Scalers if I had it, right? You can block with those. You can defend with those cards. They just don't do anything on the combat chain, but you can defend with them.
Yep, you're absolutely correct.
Anyway, let's move on. Signal Jammer. This is the blue item, Mechanologist item. So another item at blue, which is really cool. We haven't really had, we've only had Teklo Core before this as a playable item, I think. Signal Jam enters the arena with a steam counter on it again. At the beginning of your action phase, destroy it unless you remove a steam counter, and each hero can't play more than one non-attack action card each turn. This applies for you, and it's going to stick around for 2 of your opponent's turns. This card's really interesting. I think maybe against Runeblades, where else do you see this being played? Wizard, maybe?
Well, you had an argument about the last card that disruptive effects like this usually aren't good enough. They're kind of annoying at best. This for me falls into that category.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty good against some things. Like it's very annoying as a Runeblade, I'm sure. But is it worth having an item in your deck that doesn't block, that also when you play it doesn't have go again? I don't know. This one for me, I think this one may not see as much play.
Yep, I think we can move on. I'm not excited about this card particularly, but I think it's interesting to see, and probably really good in Data Dollar. It's a blue item. That's kind of what. Speaking of blue items, Teklo Pounder. This might be like MVP alongside the new specialization for Data Doll, but also potentially could see play in boost decks. So it's a 2-cost blue Mechanologist action item. And it comes into play with 3 steam counters on it. It has a once per turn effect, which is give +2 to an attack action. If you've boosted, you can give +2 to an attack action. Cool card.
Yeah, Hayden, for sure. This is definitely a very good card, particularly a very good card in Data Doll. My question is this going to be good enough to see play in Dash? And we have a different frame of reference than we did before. In previous metas that were hyper aggressive, like Chain or Briar, items were very punishing to play sometimes, and you would only play the very, very good ones. So maybe that, moving into Everfest, we have more opportunity to play cards like this. But yeah, and what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. It's blue. It's an item. I could see it being played in aggressive boost decks. I think it's hard to find the slots in just in regular dash decks, maybe mid-range or control decks. Especially, I think control doesn't want this, but even in mid-range decks, hard to find a spot. But yeah, I think Data Doll seems very good, and also potentially in some aggressive boost decks. Last card I want to talk about is not for Dash, but it's going to impact Dash, and I want to talk about what we think the impact is, and that's Smashing Good Time. So this is the 0-cost generic action that the next time an attack action card hits a hero this turn, you may destroy an item they control with cost 2 or less. So, very much targets those chambers and purifiers. And if it's played from Arsenal, it gives the next attack +3 as well. So important to note, unlike Plunder Run, this is just the next attack if it hits, so not future attacks for the turn. So it's a bit less good than like a Plunder Run effect, for instance, in terms of how that works. But this clearly is going to be something that people look at to potentially target Dash. My question is, first of all, can decks find space to play this card to target Dash? Is that going to depend on how big Dash is in the format? And then also, like, how good is this? Like, it probably is going to require an attack reaction as well, right? To be able to play this in terms of get it over the top, right?
Yeah, so I think that if you're playing this as the first non-attack action into an attack action, yeah, I mean, they're just going to dump their hand, right? You're playing it on something with Dominate. I think that's pretty good. If you're playing it in Briar and it's your second non-attack action after you've kind of maybe done non-attack action, attack action, I think it can be pretty good in that sense. But the main question here is, are people going to play this as a sideboard card to punish Dash? And I think yes. I think it's good enough. Breaking items for Dash is, I think, important enough to have this in your sideboard.
Yeah, I'm dubious. I think this is very hard to fit into most decks. I think a deck like Katsu, for instance, or maybe Briar can fit this in terms of just being able to make sure they can push it through. Maybe, yeah, I mean, that's honestly, maybe Bolton, because you have attack reactions. But I'm generally think this is going to be less impactful than we might think it is now that we see the card, now that we kind of dive into it. I think Dash is going to fare fine, even with this card in the format, to be honest. I think when you know about it, you can play around it. You probably bring in defense reactions against the decks that are going to be playing this card anyway. So yeah, I don't... The
D reacts, that's particularly... Because I wonder if this would be good enough in Bravo.
So I was thinking, yeah, Bravo might be the best for it, actually, to be honest. Like, is it the card, you dominate, play it, and then maybe you even also can pummel or something? Like, yeah, like it could be. It could be good enough.
Mm-hmm.
But it only kills one item, and that's not enough as Bravo.
Is it not enough? That's a good question, right? Like, how many items is enough for Bravo to not get absolutely destroyed by Dash? It definitely helps.
It definitely helps. So in an aggressive Bravo deck, which is maybe how you need to play it anyway, yeah, like killing their chamber early, maybe getting the second chamber they get and setting them back so they can't take over the game, maybe that is enough. And then you don't die late game because they're coming in for 12 damage every turn off 2 cards or whatever. Yeah, maybe that is enough. But we'll have to see. Anyway, I want to talk about just archetypes. I think we're going to see a bit more Boost Dash potentially come into the format. It's got some tools. T-Bone's really cool. You've got maybe, other cards like the new item. You've got Rotary Ram. And then I think we're just going to see traditional base Dash decks, to be honest, with a few of these new tools, maybe like the Sphere that comes in and plays versus some of the decks like, Viserai or Katsu or whatever. And I think we'll probably go back to more of a mid-range Dash, to be honest. That's probably what I would start with anyway. Or a Boost Dash. I really like Boost Dash, and maybe you can find room for the shotgun.
I agree with you completely, except for Dissolution Sphere. I wonder if that is good enough to play more defensive and fatigue strategy. Not fatigue, but,
Control.
Defensive Dash that assembles the crazy board. For sure. Yeah, there's one thing I want to say when we were talking about Dash and the importance of having Dash exist in the game in the format. It's kind of a tangent now, but I think that Dash is a very good anti-fatigue deck. And theoretically it could keep a lot of formats in healthy because of that.
Yep, I agree. It's like what, in theory, Rhino would do to just a pure control format as well, right? On the other side.
Yeah, in theory.
Yeah, in theory. We're going to talk about Brute next. Grades. Where are we giving our grades? I think I'm probably giving Dash... I think it's a C+ for me. I think didn't really get many tools. I think in terms of the meta, it could be like a B-. Like, this deck could be impactful in the meta for sure. I think this has the opportunity to be a really strong deck in the meta, especially if you can maybe have a list that's reasonable to Prism. If Guardians are playing around and maybe Prism's there, I think Dash has a spot, and the bannings help that to a degree. But tools-wise, I'm excited about Sphere, and that's maybe about it for the probably Dash decks you want to play competitively. So I give it a C+.
C+ for me as well. I think it's pretty straightforward on this one. But again, there is the context of the meta, which does favor Dash. While the card pool doesn't, the additional cards we got in Everfest doesn't make me super excited to play Dash, Briar and Plunder Run being taken out of the format definitely does. Briar being taken out of the format, I mean, that's not guaranteed.
All right, that's going to wrap up part 1 of our Everfest impact on Classic Constructed. We're going to do a 2-parter on this, so we'll be back next week talking about the rest of the classes and the impact that we think these cards and Everfest overall, plus the bannings and erratas, is going to have on this Classic Constructed format. It's a longer Classic Constructed format. We're going to have this with us for a while as we head through ProQuest season, and into the first Pro Tour. So, it'd be interesting to see if we look back in a few months what our predictions look like, Brendan. But we've got a week between now and our next episode to think on the rest of the classes. Do want to say a big thank you to all of our patrons for all the support you do give us and for what you enable us to do. Go check us out on YouTube. We've got gameplays up there. We've got deck techs up there if you haven't already visited the YouTube or you aren't watching this on our YouTube channel. And we're on Twitter. Brendan is at BrendanAPG, and I'm at Ian_Dale, like the tunic. Come and engage with us on Twitter. Join our Twitter Spaces. Brendan's been running some Twitter Spaces, which have been really cool. I've been lurking in the audience for a lot of those, and I've participated in a few, but they're really cool. Come up on stage, share your thoughts, and just join the discourse with the rest of the community. But until next time, Brendan, we'll see you in the next one.
Makes no sense when you say that, Hayden.